Good morning, seniors. This is Mrs. Fulton. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you today. My daughter is sick, but I wanted to give you just a couple of reminders about your presentations coming up on Monday. And I will also be talking you through a sample presentation. So to see those things, listen on. In terms of presentation reminders, the slide that I currently have pulled up just goes over a few things I noticed during our impromptu practice. So here are my suggestions. One, when you get up there, like we've discussed, pause, count to 2, remember to breathe, and then begin. The other thing I'm going to recommend is practice some positive self-talk. You guys are doing such an incredible job with your speech preparation, with your enthusiasm, with your focus. So repeat to yourself in your head, I'm prepared and I'm going to do well. You're all going to be great up there. The other thing I've noticed is that when we end speeches, we have a tendency to rely on some casual phrases to signal that you're done. Instead, end on a positive, powerful, clear ending message. So avoid things like, that's it, I'm done, yeah, or that's all, or the dreaded just shrugging your shoulders like, I don't know what else you want from me. So avoid those items while presenting. Some other presentation reminders: don't let your nerves get to you. Oftentimes when they do, I've been noticing people are slipping into a somewhat informal tone or relying on some informal language. Really try to avoid that by practicing. That will help you. The other thing I've noticed is when our nerves get to us that sarcasm starts to rise to the top. And remember, sarcasm really doesn't translate well when you're presenting. Finally, the last couple things I want to talk about with your presentation reminders: remember to avoid reading from your note card. You're talking about yourself, so it's okay to use some cues on those cards, but you can speak extemporaneously. So for those of you that want to know what that word means, it means a carefully prepared but delivered without notes or with minimal notes type of a speech. Lastly, I want to touch on posture and mannerisms. Make sure that when you're up there, you have a strong presence and posture. You're standing tall, you're standing straight, and then avoid some of these distracting mannerisms like swaying or shifting your weight back and forth or leaning on the podium, cracking your knuckles, twirling your hair, tapping the podium. Those are all items that will distract from your speech content. The last reminder slide I have for you this morning is your content reminders. So remember, your speech needs to fill roughly 3 to 5 minutes. Please don't worry, if you're following the outline, you're not going to have any difficulty accomplishing this goal. Reminder to use strong organization, so that clear attention getter, clear thesis and overview, focused, effective topic sentences, and a well-connected conclusion that links back to your thesis and AGD at the beginning. Again, follow the outline and you will be in great shape. My next reminder for content that I've been talking about all week: make sure that you use clear, specific examples. So I'll refer back to my barista example with the communication piece. If strong communication is one of your strengths, remember, it's too general to say that you just like to talk as your example. Instead, you might share something like, during my job as a barista at Caribou, I communicate with customers to help increase sales, and I also communicate with my colleagues to build our team. Finally, for that third body section, make sure you choose one career and then 3 personality traits that support you in that career. You can use the 16 personalities results page for the workplace habits and career path section. Those will give you some more ideas. Again, make sure you provide specific examples about those personality traits. My final content reminder is that your slides should have more images than words. So keep to 20 words max on your slide. And in a second, you'll see the student example where this student, to be honest, used almost exclusively images. You do not have to go to that extreme. So shifting gears, I'm going to pull up the sample student presentation. So here is the student's opening slide. This is the slide that she used for her attention-getting device. I believe this student said something like, "I've known my purpose for a very long time. I want to become a police officer and I want to help serve my community." This is her overview slide. She then went in to say, "As it turns out, I actually fall into the defender personality type, or the ISFJ." She then proceeded to go over each of her letters for her personality type, and she did give definitions, although as you can see, she did not provide definitions on the slides. This was her thesis slide. So this is where she talked about how she agreed with her personality results, and she also gave us a roadmap for the fact that she'd be talking about strengths, weaknesses, and career path personality traits. This slide was her first slide for strengths. So this was her topic sentence slide where she went over the fact that she'd be talking about her strengths of teamwork, respect, and I believe it was communication, which we'll get to her examples here in a second. So here's her first example. She talked about teamwork and her role as a barista at Caribou. She did provide that specific example about Caribou and her role there. Her next slide was her second example for strengths, and this was about her respect of others. And she talked about volunteering at a location called Wesley Meal in Minneapolis, and talking about how she really learned respect for other people and for many walks of life by volunteering at this location. The third slide is where she discussed her unique and original thinking. So that was her third trait. My apologies, it was not communication like I first said. Here she actually brought up her participation in an art show, and she talked about how that helped hone her creativity. Okay. Then she transitioned into her topic sentence slide for her weaknesses. So on this slide, she did include the 3 traits that she'd be talking about. I find that helpful as a guide. So she mentioned that she would be talking about her resistance to change, her difficulty focusing, and her anxiety in high pressure places like school. Then her first example slide talked about that difficulty focusing, and she chose to offer her solution for how she combats these weaknesses, which I thought was an ingenious idea. So here she talked about her trouble focusing. She talked about how she organizes herself with a planner to help her focus. This slide, she talked about how she's resistant to change, and so she's maintained friendships for a very long time. And she also talked about how she thrives on routines, and so she tries to stick to routines to limit the amount of last-minute changes. Her final weakness slide talked about how she feels anxious in high-pressure situations. And so she talks about how she practiced mindfulness and breathing to calm herself. And she also tried to locate and seek out quiet spaces, even in crowded places like school. So she talked about the library or empty pods where she could work and refocus. Her next slide was her topic sentence slide for her future career paths, and she also included her 3 personality traits that she thought would help her in the career of police officer. So she talked in her topic sentence about being volunteer-minded, supportive, and a strong communicator. This is her first example slide for her personality traits about being volunteer-minded. Her example slide talked about her volunteer work at Ruby's Pantry and how she really came around to seeking out volunteer opportunities after participating at Ruby's Pantry. Her second slide talked about her desire to be supportive of others, and her example was about how she has served as a peer mentor both at school and through her church. Her final slide, she talked about her strength as a strong communicator, and here she again referenced a volunteer position, but in this one I believe she actually referenced from that back slide the Second Harvest Community Food Bank, which my one critique might have been to include that clip art on this slide. This was her final slide for her overview of her personality type, where she talked again about agreeing with her personality traits, overviewing her 4 letters, and then she ended with that powerful statement that connected back to her AGD about how she does feel called to serve as a police officer and be a true defender of her community. And that sums it up. So those are all the steps you need to take in your slideshow. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out via Schoology message and I will do my best to get back to you. Good luck all, have fun with it, and happy slide creation. Have a great Friday and a good weekend.